Keith Rubel, and welcome to the Priest TV show. I have with me today Steve Willard. Steve is one of the founders of the museum. He's also on the board of directors. And Steve, thank you for allowing us in today.
Thanks for letting me come here.
Tell us a little bit about the founding of the museum. How did it all come about?
That goes back more than 20 years, and it started with our old police headquarters down next to Seaport Village. And we originally had ideas when we moved out in 1987 that the building would one day be reused as a part of Seaport Village. In 1996, some officers found out that the plans were to demolish the building. So the idea became, wait a minute, that's an important building, it's historic, it's architecturally significant. So the idea was, let's rally some people, we'll save the building, and we'll have a police museum there on site. Ultimately, we did save the building. The museum, for a variety of reasons, is not located there. But that's really how we got started with this whole thing. And there had been ideas to create a police museum for many, many years prior to this, and just logistically, for a variety of reasons, they never got off the ground.
And usually it's money.
Money is one of them, yeah. Organization is another, so for sure, yeah.
So at some point in time, it happened.
It did, and we were very fortunate to be in a position where sort of all the planets aligned for that. And had it not been for the work of some of those people in the 50s and 60s who were talking about a museum, we could not exist today, because they were out gathering a lot of artifacts and documenting a lot of stuff with officers who are now long since deceased.
Now, these artifacts were in private hands, and they were donated to the museum?
Yeah, some of them were. Some of them were stuffed in police storage bins, things like that. Our biggest enemy for, quite frankly, any museum is the clock. As time goes forward, people will look at stuff and go, this isn't important, I'll throw it away. They're great at preserving stuff that's 80 years old. Not so good at preserving stuff that's 8 years old, but 8-year-old stuff turns into 80 at some point.
So now, how about you yourself? Are you still with the police department?
I am. I've been there for going on 35 years.
Wow. No retirement for you.
Oh, there will be a retirement for sure. It's just not yet. So I like the job. It's fun. I've been doing it almost literally my entire adult life.
Wow.
So I like it until I get sick and tired of me, I guess.
Now, you're also an accomplished writer, author.
Not bad for a guy who hated English class as a kid. I couldn't stand writing, and I like to read, didn't like to write. And how that came about was when we were putting together our very first museum, which is located downtown at 2nd and G Street in a very small storefront. I started doing a lot of research on just the stuff that we had. And along the way, I started realizing there's a story here that needs to be told. And since that time, I've written 4 books on the history of the police department from a variety of different angles. But one of the most important things to remember is it's not my story. These are my books, but these are other people's stories that I'm able to tell. I'm just a fortunate guy to have all this information and the ability to put it into a word processor, I guess.
Well, in any metropolitan area over the years, there's a lot of sensational things that take place that fall under the guise of public service and public protection. So, like crimes, notorious crimes, and I'm sure there were a few here in San Diego.
There's been quite a few, but that's one element. But the other element is, too, is every major event that has happened in the city of San Diego, the police department has participated in. Not only that, we've had some major events here that were firsts in America. And a couple examples would be the PSA plane crash. That was the largest aviation disaster in American history at the time, and we had to figure out how to deal with that. San Diego PD also, unfortunately, had to participate in the San Ysidro massacre, which at that time was the worst mass shooting in America. Again, that's never happened before, and we were, there to ultimately bring it to a resolve and investigate it. And then we had a really weird case where a guy stole an army tank and went rocketing down the freeway, and there was nobody had ever seen anything like that before in American history.
In fact, I was in town in San Diego when that happened.
I think that's one of those "where was I when it occurred" moments that everybody remembers.
You've been open here at this location, which is the address? Yeah.
This address is 4710 College. This is the old college library for people who might live in the college area. They remember it. And we inherited from the city. It's a city asset, so we're here on a use permit. And it's about 5,000 square feet. To be fully functional for what we need as a museum, we need to be, number one, in an area that's synonymous with tourist traffic. This is a wonderful residential neighborhood. We got a great college here, but it's not a place that a lot of tourists would naturally just come through. So that's number one. Number two, we need to be about 20,000 square feet because we have the largest fleet of historic police cars, probably in the world, certainly in the United States. One of the things we found with our vehicles, and they all run, and they date as far back as 1926 all the way up to modern police cars. When we take them out, the more historic police cars, people will actually run to us. They want to see these cars. They want to interact with it. So there is a great public interest as well. It's just we need to be in a place for that.
And it's also a wonderful place for kids to become familiar with, because sometimes the law enforcement gets a bad rep.
Yeah, it's hugely important for community relations as well, because unfortunately the nature of law enforcement is most people, when they have an interaction with a police officer, is a negative circumstance. Something bad has happened. Either there's been a tragedy or there's enforcement action taken, which very few people are really happy when the police are engaging like that if they're the ones having the law enforcement on them. But yeah, it's important to see, we're an asset to the community. We're not the bad people that, takes people away. And if we do have to take somebody into custody, there's a reason for it. So a lot of help and understanding really goes a long way in both directions.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some basic facts. You're a nonprofit.
We are a nonprofit, 501c3.
And you have a website.
We do, sdpolicemuseum.com.
sdpolicemuseum.com.
Yes, sdpolicemuseum.com.
Okay, and what do your hours of operation?
We're open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from noon to 4, Saturday from 10 to 2, and we're staffed by volunteers as well, which means as a nonprofit, if for people who want to donate to a nonprofit, one of the first questions you want to ask is how much of your donation is actually going towards running the business? And in this case, it's 100%. None of us get paid, and we never have.
How do you keep the lights on and keep the doors open?
Well, we sell merchandise, and the books that I've written, I donate all the proceeds from that. The other thing we do too, and this is a lot of things we've learned by accident. There wasn't a manual on how to run a police museum. We got this started. We're one of the first in California for a large city anyway. So we took our lead from the LA Police Historical Society. They helped us a lot in the early days. But one of the most successful ones that we do, and we do galas and things too, is we literally take one of our old police cars, park on the street corner, and people come by and pay money for pictures with us. And that generates a lot of revenue and a lot of public relations too. Everybody has a story. Hey, I love the car, or this and that. And occasionally it's negative, but 99% of the time people are very, very positive.
Now, speaking of revenue, is there an ambition that you'd like to talk about?
The more money you have in the bank, the better. But as a nonprofit, you don't want to have too big of a savings account, because that means, what are you doing with the money you're raising? Why are you just keeping it? So it's a fine line. We want to buy artifacts. It's expensive to run this. We have to have insurance. And as you can well imagine, some of these artifacts are quite valuable, so the insurance levels are high. Operating a fleet of 20 vehicles, where do you get parts for a 1932 Ford prisoner wagon? They have to be all handmade. The vehicle right now is undergoing some rust removal and a paint process that's fairly expensive. So we're constantly raising money, and that's where a lot of it goes to, is towards operations of the museum.
Well, if you don't mind, let's take a look at this wonderful museum.
Sure.
That we've heard so much about, and share it with our viewers at home.
Okay, great.
This is one of our earliest exhibits, and we put this together. We wanted this to be a timeline, if you will, of where things got started and how they progressed. In this, there are some, like I said, some of the oldest things we have, including, there's a couple of replica things in there, but some of the more interesting originals are these kerosene flashlights. I mean, these are literally put kerosene in there, light a wick, and you carry it. It's supposed to be clipped to your belt. I don't know how somebody would not catch their uniform on fire doing something like that. Old barrel handcuffs, and then there's a day stick in there. And it's interesting because a lot of people know the term nightstick, but most people don't know what a day stick is. A day stick was a lot shorter, and it was carried inside the pant leg versus a nightstick, which is much longer. The leather-bound book right here is the first hiring log from 1889. This is where every officer who was hired that's literally day one's personnel records. So this is how we were able to figure out who the original first officers even were of the San Diego Police Department. The uniform over here, a lot of people see old-time pictures of SDPD officers, and they wear the long tunic with the helmet, almost look like London Bobby inspired officers. And the question always becomes, were they unarmed? And the answer is no, they were never unarmed. They wore their weapons up under the coat. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. I've seen different news renderings about how people did not want firearms displayed in public, including by the police. So that was perhaps one of it. There may be other reasons, but like I said, that's one of the things a lot of people ask: were the police unarmed? And the answer is no. This is moving up more into the 1900, early 1900, all the way up to 1920. And this is where there's significant noticeable changes within the police department. Number one, these green uniforms. Most people have no idea law enforcement ever wore green. And believe it or not, this was actually a fairly common uniform all up and down the West Coast. These look very much like World War I doughboy type of uniforms, and that would be accurate. But Los Angeles wore these. I'm not sure if San Francisco did, but like I said, there were a number of large agencies that did as well. Contained in this also are a couple interesting things. This is an 1899 Colt 38 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Just by itself for the model is a rare gun. It's 120 plus years old, which also makes it interesting. However, this belonged to Chief of Police Keno Wilson, who then passed it down to every other chief. And then when Jerry Sanders became chief, he actually gave us the weapon to have as a museum artifact. So this is an incredibly valuable gun because of the history, because it's carried by a chief of police. So that's one of our artifacts, and that's why it's in the heavily armored case as well. Couple other interesting things here is a monument recognized in the city of East San Diego. I don't know that most San Diegans are even aware there was a city of East San Diego. If anybody lives on Boundary Street, that was the dividing line. Anything east of there was the city of East San Diego. They ceased to exist in 1923, and we incorporated them into the city. And then there are some of the badges of the East San Diego Police Department as well. Perhaps most noticeably different as the department changed was the introduction of policewomen. And our first policewoman with that title was hired in 1915, but prior to that, we had female officers as matrons, which, as the name might suggest, did matronly duties within the jail, tending to female prisoners and juveniles. However, we had inside matrons and outside matrons, and an outside matron was somebody who did any type of enforcement outside of the police headquarters in the jail. You have to understand with this type of stuff what society was like at the time. Women did not even have the constitutional right to vote, yet we have full duty police women employed here. So a lot of this had to be soft shoed in introducing this to society. This is Lucy Jerdot, this mannequin here, and she was the La Jolla's policewoman in 1917. She was hired, and this is a replica of her first uniform with the long skirt and the belt and the sweater. And her picture is actually on the sign on the wall as well. And it's also on our website. But she was hired basically because the citizens of La Jolla were very concerned about females at the beach displaying their ankles in public. And they had, of course, a lot of sailors coming through, and you can see how your imagination might get carried away on that one. So a little bit of a funny story today, but at that time it was very, very serious. To back up a little bit over here on the right-hand side, this is a 1917 45 caliber revolver. That in itself makes it somewhat of a rare gun given the age and the caliber. However, the story behind this is pretty remarkable. A group called the Black and White Bandits started hitting, and they hit multiple banks from San Diego all the way up to Los Angeles. And the way that San Diego used to, many, many years ago, handle bank robberies, they literally closed down the city, block off every exit, and then literally just come right in. We were not able to catch them initially. They operated for almost 3 years until they decided to rob a bank, which is at 33rd University. The bank is not there anymore, but there still is a bank there. But the robbers went in, and the manager side have had about enough of this and opened fire on them. As the robbers ran out, people in the neighborhood also had guns, started shooting at them also. Believe it or not, the robbers did not get hit, but we got some good clues, and our detectives went down and made the arrest down on Clay Street, and that's the gun that was used in the Black and White Bandit holdup. The chief of detectives had it engraved, and he gave it to the sergeant who made the arrest as sort of a trophy. Today, that would violate a number of department policies on handling of evidence and things like that. So some of the artifacts we've gotten have been literally handed down as our treasures and things. And again, I don't know we'd be able to replicate that type of thing today. As we're moving forward here, again, the department is starting to change. They moved from that high collared coat into still the green uniform, but with an open collar. And then one of the more remarkable stories of history is about an individual named Harry Raymond. And Harry Raymond was the chief of police of San Diego for only 90 days. This is a little bit of his career up here. But Harry Raymond, after he left San Diego, went to Los Angeles, uncovered a whole lot of corruption between City Hall and the LAPD. And then one day gets in his car, starts ignition, the car blows up with him in it. He lived through the blast, and his testimony brought down the house, literally had the mayor recalled. 10 members of the LAPD went to prison for that. But what it did was literally it changed the culture of law enforcement along the West Coast from a lot of nepotism into a very professional organization. Everybody started cleaning house. So he probably, most people don't know who Harry Raymond is. He played an integral part in changing the culture of law enforcement in California. This is the 1935 uniform. It's a very attractive uniform. It's made of wool. Unfortunately, it was the only uniform allowed by officers to wear in 1935. And I had an officer one time of that era tell me, he goes, yeah, the uniform looked great. He goes, but that uniform be warm in Alaska in the dead of winter. He goes, you can't imagine wearing it on a hot day in East San Diego. So no air conditioning in the cars. A lot of officers are out walking. These are some tough individuals. These are the plaques that used to be on the old police headquarters down on Market Street next to Seaport Village. Ultimately, our goal is to have them put back on the building. When we took them into our custody, it was a done deal. The building was coming down, and we were told, whatever you want, you can have. So they're here for safekeeping. Ultimately, this will move out of the museum. Another of those remarkable stories is Bert Ritchie. And Bert Ritchie was one of a number of African-American officers who served the San Diego Police Department in pre-World War II. Today, our force is very well integrated. Nobody would look twice at a person of color serving in the ranks. That wasn't always the case. And Bert Ritchie was a detective sergeant in 1943 supervising white officers, which was remarkable for the time. One of the things we like to brag about is he was not our first black officer. Our first black officer was in 1850, a man named Richard Freeman, or his name may have been pronounced Freeman. He's a former slave. And to have that 13 years before the Emancipation Proclamation is remarkable. But also we had a number of officers. When SDPD was formed in 1889, prior to that were city marshals. But since 1889, and even prior to Bert, we had a number of black officers, including John Cloud, who did a full 20-year career and retired as a sergeant in 1938. Now, when he first started in 1918, here we have a black police officer, and yet Major League Baseball celebrates Jackie Robinson. Well, they should, but Jackie Robinson was born in 1918, and yet here we have an integrated police force the same year Jackie Robinson was born. So there's some bragging rights here as well. We'd like to point that out. And again, it's understanding what the history is, because a lot of times people go, what's the big deal? And that shows you we've made some remarkable progress if people look at it, what's the big deal? Because at one time it was a very big deal. So this is getting into, again, integration of the force with women officers. And even today you hear the discussion, women in society do not make the same as males, as their male counterparts. Same job, different pay. We have been, at least since 1953, paying women the exact same amount to do the exact same duties. So we've been way ahead of the forefront on that. Today, women serve at every rank in the police department. We had, obviously, our last chief of police was a woman. She was only one of the top 10 major police departments in the United States. She's the only female police chief at that time. So pretty remarkable. That doesn't mean it was easy, and it doesn't mean the deck was always stacked exactly fairly. So a lot of the female officers of the 1970s, when they realized we're going to put women in the field, they're going to dress the same, they're going to wear police officer, not police woman, but police officer, and they're going to do the exact same job. There were still some dinosaurs out there that said, well, you know what, we can't fire them, but let's make it very, very difficult and maybe they'll just go away. They didn't, and a lot of them really thrived. But this uniform here, if you look at it, it's got a very short dress, and that's the dress jacket that that mannequin is wearing. But here's a picture of it right here. You can't imagine no police work in something like that. So today the uniform is exactly the same. And again, same job, same duty, same pay. So again, I think we're out on the forefront there. These are some of the badges of different police women throughout the years. This is Lucy's badge. I showed you that mannequin of Lucy Jerdot. That's from 1915. So the badge is, well, 105 years old. And then as it moved forward, you can see that they've worn different ranks, and then that's Shelley Zimmerman's badge there. This is our air support unit here, and this is one of the most interactive things that we have here. We actually have videos from the helicopter. And I think anytime anybody lives in the city hears that whoomp, 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 they're going, what the helicopter is going on out there? So they're looking around, wondering what's going on. These are some of the videos, because every time the helicopter's in the air, it's shooting video. So anything that helicopter's flown over has been videoed. Some of it's evidence and can't be used. Some of it's tragic, we're not going to use it. But this is, in these cases, the films we show, the good guy always wins. The dispatch center is really the first line of any time people have an interaction with San Diego Police, or for that matter, any law enforcement or emergency services. It's through either 911 or the non-emergency line. Things have changed quite a bit. A lot of this stuff that looks very archaic, believe it or not, was used up until the 1980s and 90s. And it was very reliable as well. Some of these consoles had literally only 20 minutes out of service time the entire time that they existed. Everything is now more computerized, so if you were to walk through a dispatch center today, it might look more like a computer lab than it would perhaps what you might think of as a dispatch center. But for the people who serve as dispatchers, this is probably literally one of the most difficult jobs in the world to do, because you're dealing with constant stream of negativity. You know, we had an emergency, this is what's going on, and you're listening to real lives and situations unfold on a phone line. And you're trying to walk somebody through there, keeping your own emotions in check. So we really wanted to pay tribute to the police dispatchers that do that job. It's incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful, and I don't think a lot of them get the credit they deserve for doing that. This is our mounted enforcement exhibit here, and the mounted enforcement unit is kind of interesting because a lot of people think, oh, on day one, everybody rode horses. Not true. Of the 12 original officers hired, only one rode a horse, and that officer was paid extra to do it. But so throughout the years when they have had horses, they've been used for very specific tasks, not just transportation where the officer comes riding up answering a call. So the last time that the horse mounted unit existed was in 2010. My personal opinion, that may come back at some point because they do serve a purpose. Now there is a huge cost factor involved in maintaining horses, number one. Number two is that, and I'm not an expert on this, but I've had people tell me that for every 10 hours an officer works, 5 hours of that is tending to the horse, tending to the stable and all that. So if you're strictly looking at it from an administrative point of view, you're like, is this the most efficient? It's a great public relations tool because a lot of people will come up and want to pet the horse, they want to interact with the officer when they might probably not want to interact with an officer driving a car. But they can also be used for ceremonial functions. But this picture here, this shows a demonstration, and our role, police in any type of demonstration, is protect the civil liberties of people demonstrating. They have an absolute right to do that, but also to make sure that the small percentage of troublemakers don't turn a peaceful presentation or demonstration into a riot. So having the horse there to put this up to make a visual statement of, you know, here is where everybody's going to obey the rules, and this is where you're not going to be able to get past, really does a lot. Kind of a funny story, when we brought this horse in, he's plastic and he's hollow. So when we are in moving day, we're bringing the stuff in, and two people are carrying the horse up the street. Well, as you can well imagine, for traffic passing by, that created quite a ruckus. So there's a whole bunch of funny stories about the museum. That's one of them. The other one was same with the mannequins. We brought them in, we had to paint them. So we had them out in the parking lot, and none were wearing clothes, we were painting them. And again, that almost caused a major traffic catastrophe as people were driving by, because from a distance they look like real people. Yes. So this is our replica jail cell. The reason I say replica, we do own a real jail cell. We have the bars, we have everything that goes with it. But as you can well imagine, a jail is designed to keep people in there, so they'd be very heavy. So this is actually made of wood and PVC plastic, but it serves a visual purpose. But San Diego Police does not run a jail anymore. We did up until 1974. We had a city jail for misdemeanors. If you're arrested for drunk in public, you come in and sleep it off. Everything now is done by the sheriff. In this case here, though, we wanted to memorialize that there was, in fact, a jail system at one time. So that's why this exists. If we were to put a real jail cell in there, the walls would actually collapse on themselves from the weight. So that's why it's literally a movie prop, if you will. If you're to do sort of a tales of the museum, tell us something that nobody knows, even though they walk past it all the time, this might be it. In 1913, we had an officer named Emery Campbell received a call of a man with a gun down at 5th and E Street. And he saw the guy, he gets off his motorcycle, walks up, and he puts his hand on his shoulder. The guy, his name is Bill Bremer, turns around and he shoots Emery in the neck. Instead of backing off, Emery grabbed him and threw him to the ground and continued to fight with him. Bremer's trying to shoot his gun like this, and Emery puts his hand between the hammer and the cylinder to keep it from firing again. Ultimately, he lost his life. We nominated him for a Medal for Valor, and it was approved 100 years later. So he's been awarded. But since that time, there was this is badge number 48, but there's also badge 47. And both of them had really good stories as to how they were Emery Campbell's badges. Well, obviously, that's not possible. They both were. His certificate of appointment's right here, but it doesn't mention the badge number. The only known photograph we have of him, it doesn't have the badge number legible in the photo as well. So we're really what to do. So one of our docents one day, this was in 2010, so we're going 97 years after this incident happened, said, let's see if maybe we can find blood on it. And it's going, well, I don't see any blood on it. The badges have been cleaned multiple times. So our forensic scientists, one of our forensic scientists of the police department examined both badges and found microscopic specks of blood on badge number 48. So we're actually able to link that badge with that officer, and we since have had it sealed in this. But yeah, so it's one of your mysteries of the museum.
Well, thank you so much for the tour. It was fantastic.
Well, thank you for coming. One of the things that helps us a lot is just getting our name out into the community. I certainly hope people visit our website as well. Thank you,
Well,
Mike.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.